Lots of challenges for the government now, with Brexit talks starting tomorrow. I'm joined by the Chancellor, Philip Hammond. But before we get to that, let's talk about the aftermath of this fire. After the Lakanal house fire in South London, there was a coroner's inquest. And 4 years ago, the coroner said that the building regulations relating to fire safety had to be looked at again. Has that happened?
Can I just start by offering my condolences to those who've lost family, friends, loved ones in this terrible tragedy, and extending my sympathy to all those in the community who are affected. This is the first time I've been on the media since the fire, so I just want to put that on record. Look, we've looked obviously at those recommendations and what's happened to them, and my assessment,
what do you conclude?
My assessment is that we have responded correctly and appropriately to those recommendations. But Andrew,
let me just ask you very clearly, have you revised those regulations?
It's no good getting a government minister on here and asking me to mark our own homework. The point of having a public inquiry is precisely that a judge will look at those recommendations. He will look at how the government has responded, how landlords have responded, how local authorities have responded, and it will be for the public inquiry to decide definitively whether that has been correctly done or not.
But you are accountable to everybody watching and to the public generally for what the government has done.
Yes, of course.
The government has had 4 years to look again at fire regulations, which you were told by a coroner after a ghastly fire in which 6 people were killed in South London, you had to revise. I put it to you, you have not revised those regulations, and that is a major, major error by this government.
Well, there's a process underway, and the various steps have been taken. Research has been commissioned, which was reported back on. As I understand it, there was a consultation published earlier this year on revision to regulations.
Now, sorry, a public, there's been consultation, there's been revisions, there's been hawing and humming, and there's been this and there's that. You've had 4 years to do something you were told needed to be done, and you haven't done it. You'd have done it within 5 minutes if it had been Buckingham Palace. With these tower blocks, you have sat on this for 4 years.
No, I don't think that's true, and it's not fair. I think the point is these are very complex technical issues, and in this case, technical expert research was commissioned so that the decisions could be properly informed. Now, did it take too long? Did we handle it in the correct way?
Yes. No, surely.
Well, the inquiry will determine that. That's the point of having a judge-led public inquiry with full power to call anyone to give evidence, to call for all papers. That will put all of this stuff under the microscope and show how different parties responded. And all of that should be looked at. Of course it should.
Well, let's turn to another absolutely irrelevant question, which is that of sprinklers in this building. Again, you were told to advise local authorities to put in sprinklers. Sprinklers are not in many of these buildings. They're not apparently in most of our new schools either. Do you not need an urgent campaign, whatever the cost, to put sprinklers into tower blocks, schools and other public buildings?
Well, if the conclusion of a proper technical evaluation is that that is the best way to deal with the problem, then of course. But my understanding, Andrew, and again, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that the best expert advice is that retrofitting sprinklers may not always be the best technical way of ensuring fire safety in a building. Now, if it is, it should be done.
Well,
let's get the technical advice properly evaluated by a public inquiry, and then let's decide how to go forward. But let's be clear.
I'm sorry,
if there's something that needs to be done to make buildings safe, it will be done.
Can I put it to you that I'm not an expert either, that we don't actually need technical expertise to tell us that sprinklers help put out fires, and a lot of people sitting in blocks like that one will be watching this programme thinking there are no sprinklers outside my staircase, why not? We don't need technical expertise. The Fire Brigades Union has pointed out that there has never been a case of anyone losing their life in a fire in this country where sprinklers have been fitted.
Well, these are technical questions. Let's
leave
it
to
the. Well, I am
sprinklers
told.
Put out fires.
So I've been in these meetings. Of course, we've asked all these questions. What I'm hearing from the leading fire safety experts is that it isn't necessarily necessary to retrofit sprinklers to make a building fire safe. Now, I don't want to call that judgment because I'm not an expert, but I do think we need to look through the public inquiry at all the evidence for this, all the technical evidence. The commitment that government should make, and I'll make it now, is that when the inquiry produces its findings, and I don't mean in years' time, because we're going to ask them to produce interim findings, when the inquiry produces findings, we will act on them.
The cladding that was used around this tower, which went up like a rocket, is banned across most European countries. It's banned in the United States. If the inquiry says it's got to be banned in this country and it's got to be torn off every single building that's got it and we have to reclad those buildings, whatever the cost, will the government pick up the tab for that too?
Well, again, my understanding is that the cladding in question, this flammable cladding,
Yes,
which is banned in Europe and the US, is also banned here. That's my understanding.
So why did it go up?
Well, so the question, there are two separate questions. One is, are our regulations correct? Do they permit the right kind of materials and ban the wrong kind of materials? Second question is, were they correctly complied with? And obviously that will be a subject that the inquiry will look at. It will also be a subject that the separate criminal investigation will be looking at.
Was David Cameron, your former leader, right to say that it was important to kill off the health and safety culture in this country?
Well, he wasn't talking about fire safety and that kind of thing.
Well, he said health and safety.
Fire safety in buildings is absolutely crucial, and nobody would compromise anything around fire safety of buildings.
Well, there was a debate in the House of Commons on sprinklers and fire safety not that long ago, and Brandon Lewis, one of your ministers at the time, again and again boasted about getting rid of regulations. You know, get rid of one regulation, get rid of two regulations, and the whole conversation was about getting rid of regulations and the excessive cost of sprinklers.
Well, getting rid of regulation in order to do regulation properly, smart regulation, effective regulation. We did have a jungle of legacy regulations in this country, and I think we should be proud of the way we cleared out a lot of the unnecessary regulation to make life easier, particularly for small businesses. But nobody wants to compromise on critical safety regulations. That's not the case at all.
OK, last year there was a vote in the House of Commons to ensure that all private landlords, not the ones here, private landlords ensured their homes were fit for human habitation. How did you vote?
I think that was a private member's bill. I don't think I voted on it, but
it was an amendment to the Housing and Planning Bill.
OK. Well, I can't answer your question.
You voted against it.
It'll be a matter of record.
You voted against it, and my point is that your political critics say that the Conservatives have launched this war against the so-called health and safety culture, sneering at it at every possible opportunity. Regulation's always bad, and you have pushed far too far.
No, regulation isn't always bad. Good regulation is what we need, and we have a proper regulatory framework. Now, obviously, there are questions about it, and it's right that the public inquiry should look at those questions. But it's not the right way to run a regulatory framework just to accept amendments that people table to try and change it in this way.
Fit for human habitation seems all right, isn't it?
Well, we have a framework that makes sure that buildings are safe and fit for habitation. What we have to do is make sure that framework is right, and then also make sure that it is being enforced and implemented in the correct way. And these are legitimate questions, of course they are, in the event of a terrible tragedy like this. We must look at those things, and the right way to do it is to ask an independent judge to look at them.
The general election gives us a new situation, obviously, in the House of Commons and so forth. Are you going to go ahead with your £30 billion cuts to local authority budgets?
Well, we've...
3 billion, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, that's...
3 billion cuts. 3
billion, right.
With the BBC, we always multiply by 10.
Yeah, I noticed that. Look, we've set out a series of measures that are already legislated for. We've got other proposals that we will now have to look at again in the light of the general election result and in the new Parliament. I will be delivering a budget in the autumn, and you'll find out then what we're proposing in that budget.
But you're not saying that these £3 billion cuts in local authority spending is definitely going to go ahead now?
Well, what I'm saying to you is there's not going to be a sort of summer budget or anything like that. There will be a regular budget in November, as we had always planned. And in that budget, we will set out our future plans for public spending, for taxation, for fiscal balance and everything else that needs to be clear.